On April 20th, 1999, two teenagers walked into their high school carrying weapons. What they did next didn't just end 13 lives, it created a blueprint. This is the story of Columbine. But by the end, you'll understand why this wasn't just a tragedy, it was the beginning of a pattern that still hasn't stopped. A pattern that turned fear into policy, media coverage into obsession, and one school shooting into hundreds.
Columbine High School sat in Littleton, Colorado, a suburban community where violent crime was rare. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were seniors. They attended classes, wrote essays, worked part-time jobs. To most people, they seemed unremarkable. But for over a year, they had been planning. According to their journals and video recordings later recovered by investigators, they didn't just want to attack their school, they wanted to destroy it completely. The original plan involved propane bombs in the cafeteria, timed to detonate during lunch when over 400 students would be present. If those bombs had worked as intended, the death toll could have exceeded the Oklahoma City bombing. The attack began at 11:19 a.m. Harris and Klebold entered the school armed with a Tech-9 semi-automatic handgun, a 9mm carbine rifle, and 2 shotguns. They also carried 99 explosive devices. The cafeteria bombs failed to detonate, so they began shooting. Teacher Dave Sanders was moving through the hallways, warning students to take cover. He directed dozens away from danger before he was shot. He died in a science room, surrounded by students who tried to save him while the attack continued outside. 13 people were killed, 24 were injured. But this wasn't the most disturbing part.
What happened during the attack was horrific. What happened after changed America permanently. Within hours, news helicopters circled overhead. Cable networks broadcast live footage of students fleeing with their hands raised. The coverage didn't stop for days. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC replayed the same images in loops. The shooters' names were repeated thousands of times. Their motives were analyzed endlessly. According to media researchers who studied the coverage, Harris and Klebold received more airtime in the week following the attack than most presidential candidates receive in an entire campaign. The message was unintentional, but it was clear. If you do something terrible enough, the entire world will know your name. In the 2 decades before Columbine, mass school shootings were extremely rare in the United States. According to data compiled by the FBI and academic researchers, there were fewer than 5 incidents that fit the modern definition. In the 2 decades after Columbine, that number exploded. The Secret Service and Department of Education conducted a joint study in 2002. They found that in over half of the school attacks following Columbine, the perpetrators had specifically referenced Harris and Klebold. Some studied their methods, others saw them as martyrs. One attacker kept a timeline comparing his preparations to theirs. Another wrote in his journal that he wanted to finish what Eric started. But here's what most people don't realize. The response to Columbine didn't just fail to stop future attacks. In some ways, it made them more likely. After Columbine, schools across America implemented radical security changes. Metal detectors appeared in hallways. Police officers were stationed in buildings. Zero-tolerance policies expelled students for minor infractions. Lockdown drills became as routine as fire drills. According to researchers at Johns Hopkins University, schools spent billions on security infrastructure, but the data showed no measurable decrease in school violence. What did increase was fear. A 2001 poll found that over 70% of American parents believed a shooting could happen at their child's school, despite the statistical reality that schools remained one of the safest places for children.
Media coverage created a perception crisis. Every threat, whether credible or not, became national news. The term Columbine copycat entered the vocabulary. Prosecutors began charging students with terrorism for social media posts. Meanwhile, the actual risk factors identified by psychologists went largely ignored. The FBI's own analysis, released years later, concluded that Harris was a psychopath who sought dominance and control. Klebold struggled with depression and suicidal ideation. Neither fit the profile the media had created of bullied outcasts seeking revenge. That narrative was largely false, according to extensive investigations, but it dominated public understanding for years.
And then there was the gun debate. Harris and Klebold obtained their weapons through a legal loophole. An adult friend purchased the rifles for them at a gun show, where background checks weren't required for private sales. The handgun came from another acquaintance. After the attack, proposed legislation to close the gun show loophole failed in Congress. The vote happened just 2 weeks after Columbine. It failed by 2 votes. According to analysis by political researchers, the gun lobby mobilized quickly, arguing that new laws wouldn't have prevented the attack. They were technically correct. The weapons used were already illegal for minors to possess. But the conversation never moved beyond that stalemate.
25 years later, the patterns established at Columbine remain intact. Mass shooters still receive extensive media coverage. Security theater continues in schools nationwide. The political debate over firearms hasn't shifted, and the attacks haven't stopped. According to the K-12 school shooting database, there have been over 400 school shootings in America since Columbine. Some were targeted attacks, others were accidents or isolated incidents, but the fear they generate is cumulative. Experts in threat assessment now agree on something crucial. The way society responds to these events matters as much as the events themselves. Sensationalized coverage creates infamy. Extreme security measures create anxiety without increasing safety. And political paralysis prevents evidence-based solutions from being implemented. Columbine didn't just end 13 lives that day. It created a template for tragedy and a cycle of response that feeds itself.
The memorial at Columbine stands today, names carved in stone. But the real legacy isn't in that place. It's in every school that runs lockdown drills, every student who wonders if their classroom could be next, and every news cycle that turns killers into household names. We learned the wrong lessons, and we're still repeating them.